Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. President Trump used his first United Nations address to warn North Korea of destruction if it doesn't end its nuclear weapons program. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
North Korea's ambassador was in the front row but was seen leaving before President Trump spoke before the 193 members of the United Nations. The commander-in-chief put the rogue nation on notice. The president called on delegates to work together against North Korea's nuclear program, stating if the righteous many do not confront the wicked few, then evil will triumph.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
While the president praised recent UN sanctions against Pyongyang, he emphasized his administration would take action if Kim Jong-un continues to threaten the United States and destabilize East Asia.
No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
It was a very strong speech. I don't think I've ever heard a president threaten to destroy another country.
CBN News spoke with author and senior editor for the Washington Free Beacon, Bill Gertz. He believes North Korea has already proven sanctions are ineffective. His idea, information warfare.
That's the idea of getting the country wired up. Instead of imposing more sanctions, which haven't worked for over a decade, let's loosen sanctions on telecommunications infrastructure, computers and cell phones. Let's get the country wired up, and then let's flood it with real, truthful information about that regime.
Meanwhile, Defense Secretary James Mattis backed up UN Ambassador Nikki Haley's statements by telling reporters Monday the United States is ready to take care of the situation.
Ambassador Haley is correct. There are many military options in concert with our allies that we will take to defend our allies and our own interests.
Secretary Mattis said there are possible military options that would not create a grave risk to Seoul, but didn't elaborate. At 35 miles from the North Korean border, Seoul lies well within artillery range. Beyond other weapons, North Korea is also believed to have a sizable chemical and biological arsenal. The secretary did explain why the U.S. hasn't shot down any North Korean missiles.
The bottom line is that when the missiles, were they to be a threat, whether it be to U.S. territory, Guam, obviously Japan's territory, that would elicit a different response from us.
Mattis wouldn't say any more about the military plans, but did confirm that he discussed with his South Korean counterpart the idea of introducing nuclear weapons to the Korean peninsula. He would not confirm if that was one of the options under consideration. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Eric, thank you. President Trump is scheduled to have a meeting Wednesday, today, with Japan's Prime Minister and the South Korean president to discuss the situation. Hurricane Maria made landfall this morning as a powerful Category 4 in Puerto Rico. It remains dangerous enough, though, to decimate the island. And just weeks after being struck by a powerful earthquake, Mexico has been hit yet again. Charlene Aaron has the story.
Residents of Puerto Rico are bracing for Hurricane Maria after it battered the Caribbean Tuesday as a Category 5 storm. Maria is slamming into Puerto Rico today with winds up to 155 miles per hour. Then it's expected to turn north away from Florida, but possibly skirting the U.S. East Coast. Puerto Rico's governor calls this the biggest and potentially most catastrophic hurricane to hit Puerto Rico in a century.
This is, without a doubt, the most dangerous storm in our generation.
Thousands have sought refuge in shelters. Some fled to Florida to get away from the storm.
I was so glad, so glad to just get onto that flight and know that it was actually going to take off, you know. It's been a bit of an emotional ride, you know. It's my first hurricane that I suffered with Irma, and I really didn't want to stick around for this next one.
The storm first made landfall in Dominica, the only 5-category hurricane to hit the island.
I believe we got a very bad blow. There appears to be a lot of destruction.
In the neighboring Virgin Islands, the U.S. Navy is evacuating all military personnel ahead of the storm. The massive hurricane is hitting at the same time as people in Mexico are digging through rubble after the devastating 7.1 earthquake hit the region around Mexico City Tuesday. Police, firefighters, and ordinary citizens are searching through collapsed schools, homes, and apartment buildings looking for survivors. This natural disaster happened less than 2 weeks after a magnitude 8.1 quake affected the states of Chiapas and Oaxaca. CBN News captured this video from Tuesday's quake.
People are very agitated, some crying and screaming. I have seen people lying here, probably because of nerves, and they collapsed.
The death toll rose above 200 and is expected to climb. Mexico's president issued a video statement expressing his condolences to those killed in the quake.
Regrettably, many people have lost their lives, including boys and girls at education centers, buildings, and houses. I want to express my condolences to those who lost a relative or a loved one. Mexico shares your grief.
He says this is a very hard time for his country.
This quake is a hard test and very painful for our country. Mexicans, we have had difficult experiences due to quakes in the past, and we have learned to respond to these episodes giving all and with spirit of solidarity.
CBN's Operation Blessing is working to help people in both disaster locations, with cash grants in Puerto Rico and distributing relief supplies in Mexico.
Hi, we're here in Mexico City where a really big earthquake hit today. There's still a lot of affected areas. There's a lot of collapsed buildings still in the city. It's not just this city that's affected, it's also the surrounding towns, Morelia, Cuernavaca, a few others. So Operation Blessing has been mobilizing its mobile kitchens to provide support. The city collapsed with traffic. Everyone was trying to get everywhere, so we mobilized a unit of motorcycles to make sure that we brought water to the affected areas and brought support to those areas that are still collapsed. Thank you so much for everything you do. This can only be done with your support. Thank you so much for helping us to be here.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
CBN has offices in Mexico City. When the quake hit, members of our crew ran to a nearby building collapse to show us what was happening.
Bueno, pues aquí es uno de los tantos edificios que se cayeron ahora en la Ciudad de México. La verdad es que es un poco difícil estar grabando porque lo que la gente necesita ahorita es ayuda, es apoyo. Pero bueno, hasta ahorita van 30 edificios colapsados en la Ciudad de México.
CBN Humanitarian and Disaster Relief immediately sent $20,000 to our Mexico City office to begin urgent relief efforts there. An after-school Satan club in Tacoma, Washington is dissolving its program after only one student joined the club. Similar clubs have been popping up at other schools across the country in a direct effort to counter clubs that present the gospel to children. This after-school Satan clubs are believed to be less about Satanism and more about an effort by atheists to shut down faith-based after-school clubs. Still ahead, here on CBN NewsWatch, they're the group that bankrupted the Klan, but now they've turned their attention to conservatives. Stay tuned to CBN News for this expose on the Southern Poverty Law Center. When you hear the word Southern Poverty Law Center, you might picture a small, struggling charity in the South. You don't think of a powerful organization awash in money with a great deal of influence in the major media. But that is actually what it's become. Aldea Hurd has this story.
Once upon a time, the Southern Poverty Law Center served as a champion in the civil rights struggle. It's said that the SPLC helped put the Ku Klux Klan out of business. Klan membership used to be in the millions. Today, it's only a few thousand. But when you look at the SPLC's map of hate groups in America today, one would think America is consumed with hate. Or is it? When you've put the Klan out of business and won all your battles, but you're not ready to close your doors, you need to find new enemies to fight. You might also need to change the definition of hate. One of those new enemies is former Vanderbilt history professor Dr. Carol Swain. Swain grew up in the Old South and fought poverty and racism to become a university professor. She's an expert on white nationalism, but she's publicly attacked the SPLC, and Swain, a conservative Christian, found herself on the SPLC's hate list as, quote, an apologist for white supremacists. Other SPLC targets have included Dr. Ben Carson, who was then removed from the SPLC hate list. female genital mutilation victim Hersey Ali, and even small charities like the Ruth Institute, whose mission is to help families and children. The Ruth Institute said, "If this makes us a hate group, so be it." Among the list of Christian groups on the SPLC's hate map are many local churches, usually because they oppose the gay agenda. It includes the Family Research Council. Executive Vice President General Jerry Boykin, when asked about it, doesn't pull any punches.
Well, SPLC, first of all, you need to understand, is probably one of the most evil groups in America. They've become a money-making machine, and they've become an absolute Marxist, anarchist organization.
Also on the list, the Christian legal group Alliance Defending Freedom.
They did good work many years ago, but the SPLC lost its way a long time ago.
Carrie Kupek at ADF dismissed the SPLC as a, quote, direct mail scam, but marvels at the SPLC's revenues with assets north of $300 million.
I have never heard of a group with poverty in its name that has so much money.
Apple, J.P. Morgan, and actor George Clooney are just a few who have given millions to the SPLC. There's so much money coming in that some of it's going into offshore investments. A red flag for some, but offshore investing is not uncommon among large nonprofits. What's more disturbing is what the SPLC's opponents say is a link to deadly violence against Christians and conservatives. On August 15, 2012, Floyd Lee Corkins stormed into the Family Research Council's Washington offices intending to kill. He wounded the building manager before he was stopped. A bullet hole still remains in this console. After his arrest, Corkins told the FBI where he heard about the Family Research Council.
So how did you, this building, this organization, how did you find it? Did you look it up online, or how did you know? The Southern Poverty Law lists anti-hate groups. I found them online. Okay. A little research on the website and stuff like that.
Our people that come to work here every day come knowing that just based on reality and based on what happened here, they're taking a risk.
James T. Hodgkinson, who shot House Majority Whip Steve Scalise and injured several others at a congressional softball practice this year, had liked the Southern Poverty Law Center's Facebook page. The SPLC later admitted, "We're aware that the SPLC was among hundreds of groups that the man identified as the shooter liked on Facebook. I want to be as clear as I can possibly be. The SPLC condemns all forms of violence. But after these attacks, some are asking the obvious question, does the Southern Poverty Law Center spread hate?" The SPLC did not respond to our invitation to be a part of this story and refute the claims made against it, but publicly remains unapologetic. The SPLC says their listing of Christian groups who oppose the LGBT agenda is completely unrelated to religion, Christianity, or the Bible. These groups are listed because they repeatedly lie in an effort to defame LGBT people. In 2007, SPLC spokesman Mark Potok, in this blurry video from a conference in Michigan, said,
"I want to say plainly that our aim in life is to destroy these groups, to completely destroy them."
D. James Kennedy Ministries, also on the hate list, is suing the SPLC and the charitable arm of Amazon Smile, for dropping it from its list of religious charities. The news media uses the SPLC's hate map in stories about racism and bigotry. CNN published the list under the headline, "Here are all the hate groups active in your area." 47 conservative groups and Senator James Langford have written the media demanding that it stop using the SPLC hate map as a source.
SPLC has, first of all, no authority other than what they've given themselves to have a hate map or to list people or organizations as haters.
But there's no sign the Southern Poverty Law Center is changing course. When the left supports it so strongly, much of the news media relies on it, and the donations keep rolling in. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead here on CBN NewsWatch, Muslims claim the Temple Mount as their own, but Jews are fighting to pray and worship there. It's a civil rights battle, and we take you on the front lines right after this. Should Jews, Christians, and other non-Muslims be allowed to pray at the Temple Mount? Palestinians, Jordanians, and many Muslims say no. But Israel's High Court guarantees freedom of access to Jerusalem's Temple Mount, including freedom of worship. However, police prevent it out of fear of Palestinian riots. John Wagi has this story.
Muslims call it Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary in Arabic. Al-Aqsa, including the mosque and the entire compound, is the third holiest site in Islam. Muslims claim only they are allowed to pray there.
Muslims have to pray, but others, Christians and Jews, they can visit, just visit. Not to make pray inside.
For Jews, the Temple Mount is the most sacred place on earth. 2 Jewish temples stood here during Bible times. Jesus visited, preached, and worshiped at the second temple before it was destroyed. But Muslims say it never existed.
Archaeology backs up the Bible, which says it's our holiest place. It's the center. From the beginning of the Jewish people, many think from the beginning of the world, it's the center.
For years, rabbis said it was forbidden for Jews even to set foot there, let alone pray on the Temple Mount, because it was too holy. Now religious and non-religious Jews want their rights secured to this most holy place. Linda Olmert is Deputy Director of the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation.
Because we want freedom for everybody to pray on the Temple Mount. Isaiah says it will be a place for all nations.
For the first time in 2 years, Israel's government recently allowed 2 Knesset members to visit the Temple Mount. One of them was Yehuda Glick, who survived an assassination attempt because of his Temple Mount activism. Left-wing Israelis protested his visit, fearing Arab violence.
Those provocations that our members of Knesset are doing on the Temple Mount are not only dangerous, they are also violating what the Jewish tradition is about, which is sovereignty and inclusion.
But Glick rejects the idea that he is provoking violence by going to a Jewish holy site.
I call upon you to cooperate with us, all of those together who want peace in this place, and stop blaming others, and stop saying, look, because you go to Temple Mount, the terror is because of the terrorists, and it's because of those inciting it. And we are not giving the terrorists any presence.
Since the 1967 Six-Day War, Jordan has kept religious control over the Temple Mount. Israel maintains security, and only Muslims can pray there. Israeli officials keep a tight rein on Jewish visits to the site to prevent Muslim violence. Yossi Kuperwasser is former Director General of the Strategic Affairs Ministry.
We believe that by committing ourselves to this status quo, we help keep the peace and security in Jerusalem.
But Olmert says it's all about civil rights.
The only place I know, certainly in Israel, where there is a real violation of civil rights as we have come to expect them in the Western world, in free democratic countries, is against Jews on the Temple Mount.
And she says there's plenty of room for everyone.
And I believe that when the Messiah comes, he'll solve all the problems. Should there be, until then, I believe that there's a place for all nations on the Temple Mount.
John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Phenomenal report. Thank you, John. Stay with us. There's much more of CBN NewsWatch straight ahead. A woman in San Antonio, Texas, is putting her extreme couponing to good use. Kimberly Gagger is giving Hurricane Harvey evacuees some of life's basic essentials. The military veteran is personally delivering items like toothpaste, toilet paper, diapers, and soap to those affected by the storm. Gagger says she is all too familiar with the devastation a hurricane can cause. In 1999, she lost her own home to Hurricane Floyd. Now she wants to help others. She hopes to send those items to residents in Florida affected by Hurricane Irma as well. Residents in Florida are still recovering from Hurricane Irma, but not everyone had massive flooding and power outages. Residents in Tampa Bay experienced a different kind of phenomenon. A CBN NewsWatch viewer wrote us and said Powerful winds sucked water out of the bay instead of flooding the area. Weather scientists call the Erie event a reverse storm surge or a bulge. Others are comparing it to what happened in the Bible. As you can see, people decided to take pictures and to walk on dry land. Sound familiar? If you have a story you'd like to share with us, write us here at CBN News. You can also send it to our Facebook page. Our email is newswatch@cbn.com. Well, right now, it's time for your Wednesday word, and today I have two for you. They are source and self. Remember this. Begin and end each day focusing on your source and not on yourself. This will set self on a path to face anything. It will set faith over fear and victory above defeat. In case you didn't know, that source is none other than God Himself. With that word, make this a wonderful Wednesday. And that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about always at cbnnews.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.